Okay, great. Looks like most people have now connected. I think probably everybody's up to speed on the way this works. You will join as mute. If you've got any questions, please just put them into chat, and I'll raise them with Herb if he doesn't catch them, and answer them immediately. And anything that's still outstanding at the end, we can probably just take mute off, or give everybody the opportunity to remove mute, and you can ask the questions yourself and actually have the conversation directly with Herb. Just a reminder, this is session 8AQ on the skills and learning track. Of course, Herb would be delighted, I'm sure, to get your feedback, particularly the positive stuff at the end of the session.
So it saves me having to write it myself.
Exactly. We've got it all from last year, so we just keep the good stuff and get rid of the rest of it. So this afternoon session, working with university, is your first collaboration project. Delighted to hand you over to my co-chair, Dr. Herb Daly. Herb, all yours.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you everyone for coming along. The obligatory note here is clicking in the right place. Don't forget the raffle. And this talk, it's all about working with universities and collaboration. Now, we've had this theme on the track. We had one a little while ago today about Mainframe was talking candidly. And my aim here is that amongst a kind of a special community, we can have a level of honesty that we sometimes lack when talking about these things. So some of the things I'm going to say may seem a bit frank, but the aim is to be honest, and I hope you can be honest with me as we talk about these things, and we get into the realities, because the main aim here is to encourage better interaction between industry and academia on the platform. So let's see how we do. So some of you may have run into me some places before, looking at the list of names there, at least in some of these sessions. I'm kind of known for hanging about GSE, and I am, for my many sins, an academic. So I work at a university. Most of the time I'm giving classes and studying kind of various phenomena to share with the rest of the academic community. And Mainframe is something that I have had a long-term relationship with now. I was just saying to Paul, it's maybe 10 years next year since we had like an educators forum down at IBM Hursley that I was at, and so in that time I've gathered quite a few insights into this whole relationship business. You'll see I am a member of faculty at the University of Wolverhampton. For those of us from overseas, Wolverhampton is in the West Midlands in the UK, so not far from Birmingham, if you know the geography. We're famous at the moment for our football team that's in the Premier League, and if anyone would like to come up and visit, well, you'd be most welcome. So let's get down to cases. Universities, what do we have to offer? Well, what are we good at? Well, I talk about it as the 3 R's, so not the reading, writing, and arithmetic. So we have research, so creating knowledge or new ideas. We have recruitment, so a lot of the time people who are interested in working with universities, they are looking at a new generation of talent, and that's one of the things. That's one of our strengths: pedagogy and bringing people into a place of competency, and recognition. So we're almost like kind of referees on a football pitch. If something is really clever and really innovative, then we can give it the context to help you say, aha, right, I've really got something there. That's something special, something patentable maybe, or kind of add the theory to the practice that will make something repeatable. So if those are the kind of skills that you're looking for, then have a chat with a university. If none of that is on your mind, then I don't know, maybe we don't need to talk, right? We can drill down on that and talk about it from an organizational kind of point of view. So we could say, well, a university is an organization that connects a number of different bodies. So we bind in quite tightly with professional bodies, people like the British Computer Society or the Institute of Engineering and Technology. We are tied in quite closely with a lot of government bodies, being that national government or local government. And often we link to funding and initiatives through those bodies. So if that's something that you're looking to get access to, we could also be useful to you. We also have international links through other universities. So again, if you are looking to find out about how something you do in your industry differs or is similar to something that happens somewhere else, then again, we are good people to talk to. We know a lot about managing knowledge and intellectual property because that's kind of core to what we do. The process of formally understanding problems and bringing a kind of a wealth of context to problems that you're facing, we're good with that. We're good with that too. And kind of other analogs of those 3 R's. So that is really kind of the offer that universities have. And again, the question, so what is it you're after, right? Why is it you want to collaborate with universities? What are the things that you have in mind? And in successful projects, you find that something that has been figured out early on, right? What does a win look like as far as we're concerned? Okay. So once you know what you've got in mind, once you know what it is you'd like to do or what you'd like to achieve, you need to find a partner, so somebody to work with. And very often it feels logical to start with the institution, the organization. So how do we know what institutions we might like to speak to or to work with? Well, so one model might be to go with a local institution. So you'll be based somewhere geographically. You might look to the local or the closest institution and say, right, for logistical reasons, these are the people we'd like to form our collaboration with. And that's one strategy. Another way is to look at it from the point of view of connection. So there might be a reason why a particular institution kind of looms large and kind of waves a flag and says, hello, come over here. This might be through a recommendation. So you've spoken to IBM or you've spoken to a partner company and they said, well, we've worked with these people, they have this expertise. So you might be picking up on that. You might be working with or looking to go with an institution that's well known. So you kind of think, okay, we want to do X. Who would be willing? Who would be the type of place that we want to kind of tap into? I know that place I've heard of. Let's go after them. Let's kind of make contact and start our project. That's a strategy too. In my experience, it tends, you have to ask, what is that institution well known for, in order to kind of make that as effective as it could be. If it's not somewhere that's known for dealing in the particular area that you're dealing in, it's not as flat out no, but it's definitely going to be something to investigate. Now then we have the notion of the willing institution. So you know, they say a volunteer is worth 10 pressed men. There are institutions that, you know, sometimes it's not you looking for them, it's them looking for you, or you spot each other in a crowded room, and all of a sudden you know that these are people that you could work with. I mean, that's another way. That's kind of who's available to have these conversations. And I often talk about the numerous institutions strategy, where people kind of go, oh, I don't want to talk to a university, I want to talk to a lot of them. And again, as long as you have your goals kind of firmly fixed, I can understand why that might make an amount of sense. Where if you see the graphic that we've used there, where we have the those dating apps there, it's a similar kind of thing, you know. How do you find a good match for your idea? Sometimes trying to catch as many as possible can be counterproductive, so it's worth kind of being quite selective and focused. So there is a scheme called the IBM Academic Initiative, and I hope you've been hearing all about that in the streams earlier on. And among other things, they have a list of universities that they are working with. So that's often a good way to kind of get some insight as to who you might want to talk to. In a way, that's kind of like the connected strategy. So when thinking about institutions and whether what they do and what you do is a good match, it's worth thinking about institutional mission. Now, one of the classic mistakes that people make is, and we call this the kind of the pilot's problem. When you are a pilot, you have a very different view of flying to when you are a passenger. And very often people approach working with universities as if they were trying to send their kids to one or apply to one. And so typically the way people think is, well, the best one to go with is the one that asks the highest tariff points for admissions, which in a way makes sense if you're applying to study there. But if you're looking to work with them, you might want to think more about the fit between what you need and what they do. So when we talk about institutional mission, there are various kind of trends that you have in different universities and different university groups. And broadly, crudely, if you like, you could kind of factor the aims of the different institutions into 4 kind of models. And it ranges from models that are very theory-oriented and very, let's say, research-oriented, and that's a you know, so some of the most venerable institutions that we have. That's how they roll, and they're hugely successful in that way. To institutions that are focused very much on implementation and kind of getting things done, and kind of looking at practice. And we have some shades in between, but you find like different places would have a slightly different focus. And again, you want to match the institutional mission to what it is you're after, because that's a good way to get a successful collaboration. Now, for the Harry Potter minded among you, let me put this another way. At one end, we have the very Ravenclaw, very kind of, you know, being very smart kind of approach. We have your kind of cunning versus kind of bravery with your Slytherin and Gryffindors. And then you have your Hufflepuffs at the other end, who, you know, they'll keep going and they'll get things done. And although it's not a kind of a complete, you know, you do have kind of mixes in between in terms of institutional mission. It gives you the sense that no one mission is better than another. It's really about the suitability to what it is that you're trying to do. So think about what it is you need, and think about where you'd like to place your bets. It's very different to when you're a parent and you're trying to wish your child into a particular kind of university. I mean, actually it isn't, because really you want to match the university to kind of what they want to go into, but you see what I mean. So the tyranny of buttered parsnips. You could tell I've been longing to say that. I even announced this bit kind of like about a week in advance when I was making this slide. So fine words, butter no parsnips is an old English phrase. There's a link down there. Have a look, and it will tell you the history. So you've decided why you want to do this collaboration, and you know something about the institutional mission. So this is why these organizations believe they exist. But of course, that doesn't make it happen of itself. So unless the project that you have can be made to fit the needs of both sides, it will struggle to actually occur. And most of the examples where things have broken down relatively fruitlessly, it's all about this notion that unless we can understand the benefits of the project, the mutual benefits for both sides, it's going to be very hard to get anything started. So we've gone from a place where we know what we want, we know what the institutions we want to work with are, to, okay, how is this going to fit into what we both do, what we both need? So you might contrast when you're thinking about the relationship. How would I have a gardening project versus a fireworks display? Now, both are good, but they have different profiles in terms of the length of the relationship, and kind of how many aspects there might be to this. I mentioned on one end you have kind of like just a raid for recruitment, and sometimes people will say, oh, we need to hire some mainframers. Can we come round and advertise and recruit some? Like, yeah, okay, that's good. Come down, set up a stall, see who bites. So that's kind of like a firework display, boom, and we're gone. And then you have places that you have like a longer term relationship with. There's a number of companies that I've worked with over time, and a couple of them we actually have an MOU, so a memorandum of understanding, which is I'll come to what that is a bit later. But we look at our relationship as a bit more, as a bit longer than we need some people. Kind of where are they? But I mean, it's whatever works best. And the difference here is different types of project require different levels of commitment on both sides. And there are shades of this. So depending on what your aims are, and depending on the particular project, you will need to secure different amounts of commitment from either side in order to make them happen. Now, you'll see in the middle, we have the one where it's kind of 50-50 in terms of what people are supplying. And supplying, that's often about resources, that could be about money, that could be about permissions. But there's only one scenario where you're getting 50-50. And it kind of indicates that in most cases, one side or the other will be required to pony up, to find the resources necessary to make it happen. And as long as you can come to an agreement, as long as you can figure out a way to make that work, and it's all about those mutual benefits again, then you're dandy. But so often where things haven't worked out, one of the things I've noticed is this misunderstanding about the commitment that was being asked of either side, and then not being able to kind of work through that. There's a quote I learned from an IT manager from EasyJet when I was at the University of Bedfordshire. He said, "Nothing's impossible to the man who doesn't have to do it himself." And this ties in with the notion that sometimes our requirements come from people who don't have to get involved in the commitment. And when that happens, you can sometimes end up with unrealistic ideas. I think an example I can think of is someone coming up to me and saying, "Oh, Herb, you know these companies. We have this project. We need £3 million. Could any of your companies pledge £3 million? Huge commitment, really. What, you know, they have that as pocket change. So there's a piece to be done on understanding the commitment required in each case. So let's talk about the forms that some collaboration might take. So in terms of how you might engage them, and I'm talking now in terms of commitment, in order of kind of the amount of commitment that might be required on the side that's not the university. We have things like guest lectures. So someone from a company comes and gives a talk about what they do. Student prizes are quite a basic way that you could get involved. So kind of offer a prize for students that do something in an area that's interesting to you. You can organize workshops, which tend to be something more hands-on. And of course, the commitment there, the university will probably provide some space. You might provide some access to systems, some staffing. You can go to internships, which can be very effective. But of course, they require some organization around the back, particularly with HR and kind of related functions, or if you have a partnership around research about something that you're doing, planning for the future or in production, that's something that would come closer to that 50-50 commitment model that we were talking about. In terms of the impact that what you do actually has, well, the secret is, if you want something, just say what you want and pay for it, right? So things that you fund directly tend to happen. About 10 years ago, there was somebody saying, well, we want to get some universities to teach a mainframe course. And someone piped up and said, oh, well, I've got some funding, let me pay them and they'll develop the courses and we'll go from there. And that was exactly what happened. So things that you pay for tend to happen. In terms of making that mutual compatibility piece, and basically direct funding kind of completely diffuses that. The benefit is kind of stated right there. Research partnerships tie in quite well with your organizational mission, or what it is that your department is more than likely to be about. If you have internships, consider internships for not just students, but also academics, because one of the issues that you have is students are often wonderful kind of vectors of enthusiasm, but they very quickly kind of cycle and move on. And unless you employ them and then maintain that relationship with the university, and I've done that in a few cases, you very quickly have to start again. If you have an academic who's kind of worked with you, then they can often be a generator of future students. So it's worth bearing in mind. You also have workshops or hackathons, and I've been involved with some of those over time. And then finally, you might have curriculum collaborations where you actively get involved in possibly the delivery or the design or some other aspect of what gets delivered. But of course, that requires quite a deep relationship before we go there. So if you are choosing your collaboration area, we have a trade-off between what we find to be an important area and what we find to be an interesting area. Now, that's not to say that the two things are mutually exclusive, but particularly from an academic point of view, we understand something to be important if it has a very high impact, or it has a high value. It's an area that the world needs to know about. And a very central part of the mission of all universities is telling truth unto the world. Yeah? So that's why it kind of ranks. In terms of things that are interesting, I was going to say this is an academic thing, but actually I think this is pretty much all professions. Everybody loves a mystery. The highest point of every profession is to be a kind of a Sherlock Holmes and to look at problems that no one else can understand. So the most attractive types of problems are the ones that are either poorly understood or no one has really looked at before. And so if you think of the area that you'd like to work on, and you can understand how it falls within that matrix, then you have a good chance of understanding how successful your collaboration might be. I mean, if something involves an area that's very well understood and arguably has kind of negligible impact, maybe that's something better dealt with in-house. Maybe you don't need a university for that. And kind of the core skills that a university offers kind of lend towards these other kinds of things. But likewise, if you can understand your project in a way that pitches you in that top quadrant on the right there, then you have a very good chance of attracting the interest and the resources that you need in order to make that work. Now, sometimes when people tell you about things that have gone wrong, they'll say to you, ah, well, the university did this or the university did that. Now, I've often said this to students who are kind of trying to understand kind of what's going on around them. In effect, the university is not one thing. It is, and this is one particular lens, but there are others. It is essentially three groups who live together, but who may not always agree on what they're doing and why. And we talk about this being students, academics, and administrators. Now, the students, a lot of their focus is around things like employment, things about their experience, and enjoying what they do. The academics' point of view, they're striving for greater independence, so to kind of pull away from organizational control. They're driven by innovation and novelty, and also by impact, so trying to make a significant difference with the work that they do. The administrators, by contrast, are often motivated by efficiency, so not duplicating work or not doing work that's unnecessary, by funding, so by winning new funds or by avoiding kind of spending funds badly, and by overall governance, so making sure that things are done in accordance with the rules. As a shadow one there, I've kind of got reputation, because often on the administrator side, they will look at something and they'll say, okay, so this would be worth doing because, and the because might be to do with some of the metrics we have around league tables, or it might be to do with groups that we'd like to be involved with, or technologies we'd like to be involved with. So we have essentially these three different perspectives on what universities are for, and the truth is all of them are right. All at the same time, these different views are right. And moreover, if you want to have a viable project, you will need to connect that with at least two of those tribes, right? So unless you can interest at least two of those groups in what's going on, you will struggle to make your project fruitful. So let's talk about the initial contact. So your first run at those groups. Now, you may have contacts through personal relations. I mean, you know me. You may have friends or family involved in the sector. This might be through professional organizations. GSE is one, BCS, IET, IEEE, the usual suspects. There are also formal routes in. So the university will have services that connect with industry. So that will often be places like Business Interaction. If you're thinking about kind of employment or internships, and that might be some of the career services. And that will plug you directly into the administrator group who will be moving you around. Now, so I'm just going to have to fiddle here because while I was talking to you, I've dropped my cable. There you go. Disaster averted. There are also special things that local government might do to try and connect you with universities. And you have things like local enterprise partnerships as other ways of making this happen. But this doesn't get you away from the issue I had before, as who you're connecting with makes all the difference in terms of what you're able to do. So some of the friction points you might run up with when you first start talking to people at universities about what it is you'd like to happen. So the first is lack of context. So not everybody understands about mainframes, what they're for and why they're interesting. So it's worth having some good practiced explanations as you go into a discussion. Someone was asking earlier about why universities don't teach mainframe. I mean, one of the main reasons is very few people actually know the platform, and that's partly because a lot of them haven't worked in it. There are resources available to help kind of bridge that gap, but if you've never gone looking for them, you don't really know about them. So it's something to learn. Yeah, lack of access, lack of awareness is an issue when you first talk to people. And then we have what I call a bad case of the LODS, so large organization disease. So it's not just universities, any organization over a certain size finds it very difficult to be agile and responsive. Now, there are all sorts of ways around this, but this is generally a pattern that you might see. And this is just letting you know. So if you see these things, they're not a complete kind of mystery. I mean, friction points on your side. I mean, question is, do you have organizational permission to engage with universities? Because that might not be straightforward. Sometimes you know, your organization centrally has a deal with a particular institution. You say, well, I'd like to talk to this institution, and they say, oh, no, everything has to go through this one. You know? If you're making presentations, like giving a guest lecture, you might well need sign off for your slides to make sure that you aren't revealing any information that might be attractive to young student hackers with time on their hands. If you are looking at recruitment, you might need to have a talk to HR, for example. And there are quite a few cases where you have organizations that have, you know, particular kind of patterns. And again, this is a kind of a mission thing where they say, like, well, we want a 2-1 and above from these universities, say, and the role that you have, you worry that you wouldn't be attracting those people in, or if you did, then they wouldn't stay. So how you reconcile that so that you're able to kind of work with the people that that kind of suit your role is often something to think about. There are wonderful, innovative ways around these things, but it's just something to consider. Issues like security, I think, are an obvious one. And timing. Timing is often a big deal. So there are certain times of year where you're available and universities are available and it's all dandy. There are other times of year where priorities shift and everything will be locked up. You'll be hard pressed to get your hands on anyone for love or money. Perfect example is round about exam time. Often a company will come and they'll say, right, we want to do a recruitment event, and this is the only date we can do. And they turn up and they get single figures of people, and they say, well, why? Because, you know, we had this great job and we've got this program and whatever, what you know. And the truth is, when people are focused on their exams and their revision and their assignments, that's the only thing on their mind. Now, it's entirely possible to plan for all these things and to unpick them, and they needn't be problems. But it's worth understanding in advance that these are the things that can happen. And you show me an initiative that hasn't worked out, and I will show you how some of these friction points have come into play. So here we go. You decide your goals, you choose your partner, you make your initial contacts, you ask them for something, they do what they do, and then you figure out what's happened, right? So that is the basic model for how you make something happen. But I say need to be a little bit more sophisticated than that. So goals, partner, contact, that's written. Come up with an initial event which requires a minimal amount of commitment, because as we say, direct funding makes up, you know, that'll get you all the commitment that you want. But often for a deep and useful relationship, you probably want to walk your way up the ladder of commitment, if we kind of put it that way. And so once you've tried that, and this is particularly true if you are looking at doing this with multiple kind of partners, see how it goes, decide where you want to go from there. But what we're leaving out here is the notion that you can do these things on your own. As I mentioned, there are all these factors that come into play. My suggestion is that you find champions within the university who will promote your cause and do some of those trickier things that I've been talking about with you or for you. And my observation is that any successful initiative will have at least one champion working on it internally. So one thing to notice is champions are well networked. You could have a champion administrator, a champion academic, or a champion student. It doesn't matter. But what we know is these people will have lines of communication that go in both directions, so they can talk up and down the stack. And they will be well networked in the sense that they can make relationships for you with other necessary people. And in this case here, often academics will have links to other companies or other universities or what have you. And so they basically will help bring people in who can help you realize the vision that you originally had. And so when we take that model on board, after our initial contacts, we figure out who our champion is or are. We work with them to make a plan, so we understand those pieces that aren't obvious to people who don't know the university. Then we try an event and we see how that goes. And then we try another event and we see how that goes. And we decide where we want to go from there. So that is the model that I would recommend in terms of how you actually make these things happen in a practical way. Let's talk about a few basic examples. The simplest, least commitment thing that you could do is invite a university to come down to an event that you're running. Yeah? So it's a great way to make a start. I think the first mainframe event I ever did, I was invited by a guy called Jeff Eccleston to bring some students down to an event in central London, and they said sure, we'd love to come, and so we turned up, and you know, it was a good experience all round. It's low risk, it's low commitment. The challenges you might get, and again, you know, challenges are there to be worked around. Offsite events, you often have issues with logistics. You wouldn't believe what we have to do in terms of health and safety when we're taking students places, and it may limit the numbers of people that can take part. But that's, you know, a variation on that is the flipped invitation to an event. So the university is running an event, and you say, "Oh, can we come along? Can we have a bit of that?" So that picture that you see there is a team from JP Morgan Chase, who, when we were having a workshop a couple of years ago, said, "Yeah, we'd like to come in and have a chat with your students and tell them about what we do and about our department, and see if we can make some connections." And we said, "Sure." So in that case, you're taking all the logistical issues off the hands of the university. The only kind of challenges that you have are, firstly, kind of getting the content right, because you don't necessarily understand the context first time round. And then following up on the potential, because very often you'll have one of these events, you go down, everyone has a great time, but then how do you follow up on that if that had some kind of wider goal? You've told them about the organization, but how do you kind of get the return on the investment of that? So you have the guest lecture, which is you making an agreement to do some stuff. So that gent you recognize there is Henry Kuiper, who gave a series of lectures for us a little while ago, and that really helped kind of kickstart the mainframe community that we have at Wolverhampton. So again, that's an amazing way to start a more than shallow relationship. Of course, it does need some work and commitment on both sides in order to make that happen. So it's a bit more expensive in that sense. Another basic intervention is the internship, and often that's one of the go-tos that people have. They say, right, we'd like to start some internships. It's very good if you can make it happen. There are often complications at the company end, and it's good to have a look about how to make that work initially. But it often makes a very good start in terms of kind of skills transfer and just raising a flag to say, this is an option for people in the future. So it's often that can be quite rewarding, but it's not always straightforward to do. I've got some wonderful stories. So an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, is a document basically stating that you and the university have an interest in working together, and it may make some statements about how you're going to resource what you do, but then of course how that gets implemented, or when and where that gets implemented, you guys decide. Now basically this is a high level thing, so you would be getting senior people on both sides to make this agreement and sign this bit of paper, and that will get you permission to start doing projects of various kinds. Now, why this can make a difference is, and if you remember I was saying, often the administrator function are interested in reputation. They see this as an endorsement from an industry body that they're doing good things and potentially will collaborate with them. So we have a couple of MOUs with different companies in the mainframe space. Recently, we were applying for funding to create a new course in data science and AI. And the fact that we had this MOU in place was a decisive factor in us winning this funding, so this opportunity to create a new course. Likewise, there's companies that I work with, and when they put in a tender, along with the other things that they claim their capabilities and what they're able to do, they say, well, we have an MOU with the University of Wolverhampton, which means that we could draw on experts in their field and that we are sustainable because we have a pool of talent that we can pick up when we need to. So those can be useful on both sides in terms of getting agreements and permission, but then it's a question of kind of how we actually make that kind of stick. Right. I'm just gonna quickly talk over a couple of principles. I call this model the WASO model because in my experience, so often when people try to make these things happen, they do it the wrong way around. And the model kind of goes, look, I'm trying to do something. First, make it work, then make it successful, then make it sustainable, and then think about any other issues. And often I've seen, you'll talk about a subject. I mean, one example I've seen is like, okay, we'd like some students to come to you for the summer. I say, okay, then, could you train them up in this? Okay, then. And I say, well, so when do you want to interview them? They say, well, we have to interview all the students from everywhere because otherwise it wouldn't be fair. I go, okay. Was it fair that we spent a lot of time preparing them? Make it work first. Once you have a working project, then you can build on it, you can iterate on it. People like working projects, they like successful projects. Sustainable projects are golden, and then we can add some of the nuances that we need to add. So that's kind of general advice. Beware unhelpful cliches. So many of these kind of get in the way of what people are trying to do. Like I was telling you that story about someone asking a company to kind of get out 3 million quid at 10 minutes notice. People who don't deal with companies don't understand that that's how they work. Notion academics have a lot of time. At certain times of year, they are quite flexible, but basically work chases us. So it's often a struggle to kind of get out from under work. So they're not twiddling their thumbs, with nothing to do. Work comes to find them all the time. The notion of the real world, it's funny, and say having worked in industry for a long time and in academia, people often talk about, well, in the real world, this and that and the other. Here's the truth. Every world that you are in is real, right? The incentives are real, the punishments are real, the things that you're being asked to do are all real. So everyone is a real world, it's a different real world. The notion that students kind of work for free or work for cheap, well, it depends. But I mean, I've seen things where mainframe companies have been offering students like minimum wage to work on a placement, and that they're getting more than that working in Tesco's. Okay, that's not going to fly. Yeah, so we have to think about, what's the package. It doesn't necessarily have to be money on the table, but if we're getting buy-in from strong students, then we do have to compete with those for all the other areas that they could possibly go into. Things about people going, oh yeah, in the past it was different, and you go, well, of course, in the past it was different. The world changes. There's all kinds of reasons why. There's all kinds of discussions to have. Sometimes you find that university is a bit like tap water, because talking to them directly or using their time, you don't get charged for it, kind of like tap water. People don't value it, and sometimes you think, well, I wish I was bottled water and not tap water, because that way, people wouldn't just, kind of wash their hair with it. They'd actually, kind of think about how best to use the relationship and the time. And again, time works differently for different people. I know how time works in industry. I know how time works in academia. We have different calendars, and just understanding these things can make your life much easier. Things that seem inexplicable will then make sense. Leverage the support that IBM gives you. Encourage people to get involved with some of the initiatives that you'll have heard about in the stream this morning. In particular, Z-Explorer is running at the moment. And there is a student hub. If when you're talking to your university people, you can point them in that direction. That will be a great start, a great introduction for people. Lean into the good stuff. I mean, I've told you some of these things to warn you about what can go wrong. When things go right, it is absolutely amazing. There's so much positivity in working with the university. You know, the students, they've got a lot of fresh energy. You know, they're looking at the world in different ways. And, you know, ask yourself, you know, where could this lead? What new things could we learn? You know, what connections could we make? How could this relationship be value for you? Because there are so many different ways. So lean into the good stuff. Perfect example, you may have seen a presentation earlier this week with Professor Philip Brunner. He has a great model that I wish I had going on. He is an academic, a full academic. You know, he's teaching, he's research, he's created an online mainframe MOOC. He has consultancy roles with major companies. So people, you know, they respect his time, they pay him for what he's doing. On the back of his work, he's been able to found a startup which integrates different technologies, you know, kind of traditional kind of COBOL systems and blockchains. And he does the right thing by his students by bringing them into his company. So, you know, in many ways, he's got all bases covered, and that's a wonderful thing to see. And this is a comment from a student a couple of years ago. I run a module and I get them to write a little diary in the first few weeks of being at university. And this was one of the things that he wrote, and I found this inspirational. He says, to make my life more interesting, I've joined the Mainframe Society. I've started going through Master the Mainframe, so Z-Explore this year. And I must say, it is just awesome. Past week, I've spent many nights learning how to use it, learning about JCL, and, you know, countless possibilities. It gets you more and more hyped. So in terms of enthusiasm that you're getting from a group there, yeah, I mean, you know, great things can happen when you invest in this stuff. So we're well at the time. So lots of benefits to be had from these collaborations. If you can understand your goals, find the institutions and your champions within them. If you can match the events you want to do and the levels of commitment on both sides are appropriate, then you can create events that help you achieve these goals. I bring up a lot of the difficult bits because, in the words of Aristotle, the roots are bitter, but the fruit is sweet. And that's what he said of education. But please enjoy your journey and working with universities. I think we are so close to time that we may struggle to get many questions in, but I'm more than happy to try if anybody has any.
There's none there at the moment, Herb, but what I'll do is to enable everybody to unmute themselves should they wish to ask a question.
I've thrown a lot in, so
that's all in there. No.
Okay, great.
Like you've answered everything, Herb, and I'm sure people will be back in touch if there's anything they think of.
For sure, everyone knows how to find me. I'm sure. In case they don't, there are some details for me there. thank you very much indeed, and I hope you have a great rest of the conference.
That's fantastic, Herb. Thank you. That was a great introduction, a whole batch of different things, and a view from a university perspective. I think that would be valuable to other people, both educators looking to build those networks and also clients who are looking to build the connections with the universities, helping them understand that perspective. So thank you for that. And with that, we are done. Just a reminder of, again, that Herb will be very interested in the feedback. So if you could provide any you have, that would be great. Fantastic. Thanks, guys. I will close the session.
Thank you.